My son-in-law pinned me against the wall, his face red with rage, screaming that I was a selfish old hag for spending his inheritance. He didn't know I had a hidden camera rolling the entire time. If you hate greedy relatives and love seeing sweet revenge, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss how I taught them a lesson they'll never forget. My name's Martha, and I've lived a quiet, decent life here in Oregon for 72 years. Since my husband, Henry, passed away 5 years ago, I've kept to myself, tending to my garden and managing the modest portfolio he left behind. Henry was a practical man, a foreman at a lumber mill, and he made sure I wouldn't have to worry about bills after he was gone. We weren't rich by any stretch, but we were comfortable. We paid off our mortgage in the 90s, and we had a decent nest egg tucked away. But there was one thing Henry loved more than anything else, our cabin up at Crater Lake. We bought the Pines back in the early 80s. It wasn't a mansion, just a 2-bedroom A-frame with a deck that overlooked the water. It was where we taught our daughter, Chloe, how to fish. It was where Henry and I sat on the porch, swinging and drinking iced tea, dreaming about growing old together. But nature is brutal. After Henry died, I couldn't bring myself to go up there. It hurt too much. So the cabin sat empty for 5 years. The harsh winters took a toll, the roof started to sag, the deck rotted out, and the plumbing was shot. 3 months ago, I finally drove up there. Seeing it in that state broke me. It looked like a skeleton of the happiness we used to have. That afternoon, standing amidst the pine needles and peeling paint, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let our legacy rot. I was going to restore it. I hired a local contractor, a nice young man named Sam, and he gave me the quote, $45,000. It was a steep price, a big chunk of my liquid savings, but I had the money. I wrote the check for the deposit right there on the hood of his truck. I felt alive for the first time in years. I didn't think I needed to ask for permission to spend my own money, but apparently my daughter thought otherwise. Chloe is 32, and she's complicated. She used to be sweet, but ever since she married Derek 6 years ago, she's changed. Derek is one of those guys who always has a $1 million idea, but never actually has a job. He's tried drop shipping, crypto, flipping sneakers, you name it. They live in a rented townhouse in Portland, constantly complaining about how the system is rigged against them. I invited them over for dinner on a Sunday to share my excitement. I made pot roast, Chloe's favorite. We were halfway through the meal when I dropped the news. I've decided to renovate the Pines, I said, smiling as I passed the gravy boat. Work starts next week. It's going to cost about $45,000, but it'll be good as new. The clatter of silverware stopped instantly. Derek looked at Chloe, his eyes widening. Chloe put her fork down slowly, wiping her mouth with a napkin. $45,000? Chloe repeated, her voice dropping an octave. Mom, do you seriously have that kind of cash just lying around? It's my savings, honey. Your father wanted us to enjoy that place. Enjoy it? Derek scoffed, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that made my blood boil. Martha, with all due respect, you're 72. How many years are you really going to get out of a cabin in the woods? That's a terrible return on investment. I felt a sting in my chest. It's not an investment, Derek. It's my home. It's my memories. It's a waste, Chloe snapped. Mom, do you know how much debt Derek and I are in? We're drowning. We've been trying to scrape together a down payment for a house for 3 years, and you're just going to blow $45,000 on a rotting shack for, what, sentimental value? It's my money, Chloe, I said, my voice firming up, and I have helped you to plenty. I paid for your wedding. I paid off your student loans. That was years ago. Chloe threw her hands up. We're talking about now. You're being reckless. You're not thinking about the family. You're being selfish. Selfish. That word hung in the air like smoke. I looked at my daughter, a woman I had raised to be kind and independent, and I saw a stranger. She wasn't looking at me like her mother. She was looking at me like an ATM that was malfunctioning. "I've already signed the contract," I said quietly. "The work starts Monday." Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against my hardwood floor. "You need to cancel it. Call the guy, get the deposit back. We can manage that money better than you can." "Excuse me?" I stood up too, shaking slightly. "You don't tell me what to do with my finances, Derek." "We're just looking out for you, Martha," Derek said, his voice dripping with fake concern, though his eyes were cold. "You're getting older. You're clearly not making rational decisions. Maybe it's time we stepped in to help you manage your assets before you blow it all." They left shortly after, leaving the pot roast cold on the table. I thought that was the end of it, just a heated family argument. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. That night, I started getting texts from Chloe, links to articles about dementia and financial irresponsibility. Then came the voicemails from Derek, leaving messages about competency hearings. They weren't just mad, they were mobilizing, and I was sitting there in my empty house, realizing that the renovation wasn't just about a cabin anymore. It was about to become a war. I just didn't know how dirty they were willing to fight. I tried to shake off the heavy feeling in my gut for the next couple of days. I told myself Chloe and Derek were just stressed, that the economy was tough, and maybe they just panicked. I wanted to believe that because the alternative, that my own daughter was waiting for me to kick the bucket so she could cash out, was too painful to entertain. So I focused on the Pines. I drove up to the cabin on Tuesday morning. The air up there was crisp, smelling of pine resin and damp earth. Sam, my contractor, was already there with his crew. They were tearing off the rotted decking, the sound of crowbars and hammers echoing through the trees like music. For the first time since Henry passed, the place didn't feel like a graveyard. It felt like a project. It felt like a future. I was standing near the edge of the property, drinking coffee from a thermos, when I saw dust kicking up on the gravel driveway. My stomach dropped. It was Chloe's silver SUV. She wasn't alone. I could see Derek in the passenger seat, wearing sunglasses and looking like he was ready for a fight. They parked right behind Sam's truck, blocking him in. Chloe got out first. She didn't look angry this time. She looked like she was dressed for a funeral, somber, serious, wearing her concerned daughter face. "Mom," she said, walking over to me, ignoring the construction crew, "we need to talk, alone." "I'm busy, Chloe," I said, gesturing to the house. "I'm supervising." "This can't wait," Derek said, slamming the car door. He walked around the vehicle, adjusting his belt. He didn't even look at me. He was staring at Sam, who had stopped working and was watching us warily. "You're making a mess of things, Martha." "I am spending my money on my property," I snapped, losing my patience. "If you drove 2 hours just to lecture me again, you can turn right back around." "It's not just a lecture," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her palms were clammy. "Mom, we spoke to a lawyer. We know you're dipping into Dad's retirement funds. That money was meant to support the family, not to be thrown into a pit." I pulled my hand away as if I'd been burned. "Your father left that money to me, to his wife. He trusted me to manage it, and I have done a damn good job for 5 years. "Have you?" Derek interrupted, stepping into my personal space. "Because from where we're standing, it looks like you're having a late-life crisis. You're blowing 45 grand on a nostalgia trip while your grandkids are wearing hand-me-downs. Do you have any idea how selfish that looks? Don't you dare bring the kids into this," I warned him. "We have to," Chloe said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ethan needs braces, Sophie needs a tutor. We're drowning, Mom, and you're playing house builder. We're just asking you to be reasonable. Freezing this project is the only logical step." Then Derek did something that crossed the line from disrespectful to unforgivable. He turned his back on me and walked straight up to Sam. Sam was a big guy, a local who'd been swinging hammers since he was 16, but Derek puffed his chest out like a bantam rooster. "Hey, buddy," Derek said, loud enough for the whole crew to hear. "Pack it up. The job's canceled." Sam looked at Derek, then over at me. "Mrs. Higgins, is this guy for real?" "I'm her financial proxy. She's not in a position to authorize this kind of expenditure. We're shutting it down. Send the bill for today's hours to my email and we'll settle it, but get off the property." My blood ran cold, then hot, boiling hot. I marched over there, my boots crunching on the gravel. I am 72 years old and my joints ache when it rains, but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. "Sam, you stay right there," I commanded. My voice didn't shake. "You work for me, not him." I turned to Derek. "Get off my land." Derek laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Martha, look at yourself. You're confused, you're emotional. We're doing this for your own good. If you don't stop this voluntarily, we're going to file for power of attorney. We'll have you declared incompetent, and then you won't control a single penny. Is that what you want? To be dragged through court?" The silence in the woods was deafening. The birds had stopped singing. The workers were staring at their boots. Chloe just stood there, biting her lip, letting her husband threaten her mother with legal action because I wanted to fix a roof. "You think I'm incompetent because you won't give me my money?" I asked quietly. "You think you're incompetent because you're making bad choices," Derek sneered. "Now send the crew home, Martha. Don't make a scene." I looked at Chloe. "Is this what you want? You want to declare your mother mentally unfit because you want a payout?" Chloe looked away. "We just want to protect the assets, Mom." Assets, not Mom's savings. Assets. I was just a barrier between them and a bank account. "Get in your car," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Get in your car and leave. If you're not gone in 2 minutes, I'm calling the sheriff. And Derek, if you ever try to command my employees again, I'll sue you for harassment." Derek glared at me, his jaw working. He looked like he wanted to scream, but Sam had taken a step forward, holding a crowbar loosely in his hand. Derek got the message. He spun around, grabbed Chloe by the arm, and marched her back to the car. "This isn't over, Martha," he hailed out the window as he peeled out of the driveway, spraying gravel everywhere. I watched them go until the dust settled. I was shaking now, my adrenaline crashing. Sam walked over gently. "You okay, Mrs. Higgins?" he asked. "We can take a break if you want." "No," I said, wiping a tear from my cheek before it could fall. No breaks. Get back to work, Sam. I want this roof finished." But as I watched them hammer away, I knew Derek wasn't bluffing. They were coming for everything, and if I didn't get smart fast, I was going to lose more than just the cabin. I needed a plan, and I knew exactly who to call to help me set the trap. I drove straight from the cabin to downtown Portland, bypassing my house completely. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep my old Buick between the lines, but my mind was crystal clear. I wasn't going to wait for Derek to file a single piece of paper. I was going to see Elias Vance. Elias had been Henry's attorney for 30 years. He was a man who looked like he slept in his suit and subsisted entirely on black coffee and cynicism. But he was the sharpest estate lawyer in the state. When I walked into his office, he took one look at my face, told his secretary to hold his calls, and poured me a glass of water. I told him everything. The confrontation at the cabin, the threats about my mental competency, the demands for cash. I told him about the look in Derek's eyes, that hungry, predatory look that made my skin crawl. "They're playing a dangerous game, Martha," Elias said, leaning back in his creaking leather chair. He tapped a pen against his desk rhythmically. "In Oregon, it's not easy to get a conservatorship over someone who is clearly lucid. However, the accusation alone can be a nightmare. If they file an emergency petition claiming you're suffering from dementia and dissipating assets, a judge could freeze your accounts pending a hearing. It could stop the renovation cold and lock you out of your own money for months while we fight it." "So they can just hold me hostage with a lie?" I asked, feeling the anger rise again. "Essentially, yes. It's a tactic. They're betting you'll pay them off to avoid the humiliation in the legal battle, Elias explained. But we can get ahead of it. We need proof, not just he said, she said. We need to show that their motivation isn't concern for your health, but financial greed. We need them to admit, on record, that they want the money for themselves. That was the moment the plan clicked into place. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was a general preparing for battle. I spent the next 2 days turning my home into a surveillance trap. I went to a specialty electronics store in the Pearl District and bought 3 high-definition cameras disguised as everyday objects. One looked like a digital clock, which I placed on the mantle in the living room. Another was a USB charger plugged into the kitchen island. The third was hidden inside a fake smoke detector in the hallway. I tested the audio and video feeds on my iPad until I was sure I could capture a whisper from across the room. Then I made the call. It was Thursday evening when I dialed Chloe's number. I made sure my voice sounded tired, a little frail. I needed them to think they were winning. I needed them to think I was cracking under the pressure. "Chloe?" I said when she answered. "It's Mom." "Mom?" She sounded guarded. "What do you want? Derek is still really upset about what happened at the cabin." "I know," I sighed, letting a tremor into my voice. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe I was too hasty. I'm just feeling so overwhelmed with the house and the memories. I think we need to sit down and talk, really talk, about the finances, about everything." There was a pause, and then I heard muffled voices in the background. She was covering the phone, talking to Derek. When she came back on the line, her voice was brighter, almost sickly sweet. "I think that's a great idea, Mom. We just want what's best for you. When can we come over?" "Tomorrow night," I said. "Come for dinner. I'll make lasagna." "We'll be there. And Mom, don't worry. We'll sort this all out." I hung up and stared at the phone. "We'll sort this out," she said. What she meant was, "We'll clean you out." Friday night arrived with a storm. Rain lashed against the windows, setting a gloomy backdrop for the evening. I had the lasagna in the oven and the cameras recording. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath, smoothed down my apron, and checked the feed on my iPad one last time before hiding it in my bedroom drawer. I opened the door, and there they were. Derek was wearing a polo shirt and slacks, looking like he was ready to close a business deal. Chloe had a bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers in her hand. "Hi, Mom," Chloe said, leaning in for a hug. I let her hug me, but I didn't hug back. I felt her stiffen, but she pulled away with a tight smile. "Smells good in here," Derek said, stepping inside and looking around possessively. He walked straight into the living room, his eyes scanning the space. He didn't know he was staring right into the lens of the clock camera. We ate dinner in relative silence. I picked at my food, playing the part of the distressed widow. Derek ate 3 servings, washing it down with the expensive red wine Henry had been saving for our 40th anniversary. I poured him a second glass, then a third. I needed him loose. I needed him arrogant. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I sat in my armchair. Derek and Chloe sat on the sofa, side by side, like a tribunal. "So, Martha," Derek started, swirling his wine glass, "you said you were ready to talk finances. Does that mean you're ready to stop this ridiculous cabin project?" "I don't know," I said softly, looking at the floor. $45,000 is a lot of money, and you said you were struggling." "Struggling isn't the word, Mom," Chloe jumped in. "We're in a hole, a big one. Derek's investment in that crypto exchange, well, the market crashed. We owe people, and the interest rates are killing us." "How much?" I asked, looking up. Derek leaned forward, elbows on his knees. 70,000, give or take. My heart hammered against my ribs. $70,000. That was more than my entire renovation budget. "And you think I should pay this?" I asked, my voice hardening just a fraction. "It's not about paying it, Martha," Derek said, his voice dropping, becoming serious. "It's about protecting the family legacy. If we go under, we lose everything. Our credit, our car, maybe even the apartment. You're sitting on a pile of cash, dumping it into a vacation home for ghosts. We're asking you to liquidate, cash out the investments, give us the 70 grand to clear the debt, and put the rest in a joint account where I can manage it for you." "A joint account?" I asked. "So you would control my money?" "It's for your protection, Martha." Derek smiled, that oily smile. "You're getting forgetful, Martha. We've noticed. The neighbors have noticed. You don't want the state stepping in, do you? If I'm on the account, I can stop that from happening." There it was, the blackmail, the threat, and the admission that they wanted total control. "And if I say no?" I asked, my voice hardening just a fraction. Derek's smile vanished. He set the wineglass down on the coffee table with a heavy thud. "Then we do this the hard way," he said coldly. "We have the papers drawn up, Martha. We file Monday morning. We'll have you declared incompetent by Friday. We'll put you in a home if we have to. You won't see a dime and you won't see your grandkids ever again." I sat there, letting the silence stretch, letting the camera record his face, his threat, his pure malice. "I see," I said finally. "So those are my options. Pay up or be locked up." "It's just business, Martha," Derek said, leaning back and crossing his legs. "Now where's your checkbook?" I stood up slowly. "I think," I said, walking toward the kitchen, "I need to get something from the other room." "Get the checkbook," Derek called out. I wasn't getting the checkbook. I was getting the final nail for their coffin. But first, I had to survive the night, because what they didn't know was that I wasn't the only one who'd been doing some digging. I had found something out about Derek's debts that even Chloe didn't know, and I was about to light a match that would burn their whole marriage to the ground. Caleb sat on my floral sofa looking like he'd just swallowed a bag of gravel. The silence in the living room was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and frankly, I was enjoying every second of it. Brenda was the first to find her voice, though it was a lot less shrill than usual. She smoothed her skirt, her eyes darting between the voice recorder and my face. You can't do this, Lorraine," she stammered, trying to muster some of that suburban arrogance she wore like armor. "Recording us without consent? That's illegal in Illinois. You can't use that in court." I laughed, a dry, sharp sound that made them both flinch. "Oh, honey, you think I'm worried about a misdemeanor wiretapping charge when I have you two on tape conspiring to commit fraud and elder abuse? Go ahead, call the cops. Let's play this for the responding officer. Let's see who they cuff first." Caleb finally looked up, his face gray. "Mom, please, we didn't mean it like that. We were just stressed. You have to understand." "Stressed?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like greed. But you know what? I got curious. Why the sudden urgency? Why the pressure to sell the farm now? You two have good jobs. You drive $80,000 cars. So I made a few calls. I reached into the file folder on the table, the one they thought contained the deed, and pulled out a different stack of papers. I tossed them onto the coffee table. They fanned out, revealing credit reports and a notice of default. "My friend Marge's son works in foreclosure processing at the county clerk's office," I said casually, watching their faces crumble. "Small towns, Caleb. People talk. Turns out you aren't just tight on cash, you're underwater. 3 months behind on your mortgage, maxed out credit cards, and that consulting business of yours, Caleb, it's been bleeding money for a year." Caleb put his head in his hands. Brenda looks like she was going to be sick. The air had gone out of them completely. The bullies were gone, replaced by 2 desperate, irresponsible children who had gotten caught with their hands in the cookie jar. "We were going to pay you back," Caleb mumbled into his palms. "Once we got control of the trust, we were going to borrow against the assets, pay off the house, and then put it back. We just needed a bridge loan." A bridge loan? I slammed my hand on the table, making them jump. You are going to liquidate my life to save your lifestyle. You are going to put me in a nursing home, a luxury closet, so you could keep up appearances at the country club. Do you have any idea how sick that is? We didn't have a choice, Brenda snapped, tears finally spilling over. Do you know how embarrassing it is to lose everything? We have a reputation, Lorraine. We have friends. You have debt, I corrected, and you have zero integrity. And now you have a mother who knows exactly who you are. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the Camaro gleaming in the driveway. It looked beautiful, a symbol of freedom I hadn't realized I needed until right now. Here is how this is going to go, I said, not turning around. First, you are going to leave, right now. Second, don't bother coming back for Sunday dinners. The kitchen is closed. Third, Mr. Henderson has already drafted a new will. It establishes a charitable trust. When I die, the house, the savings, the pension, it all goes to the brave men and women of the local fire department and the Animal Rescue League. You two get the family photo albums. That's it. You can't cut us out. Caleb stood up, panic rising in his voice again. We're your family. What about the grandkids? Are you going to punish Ethan and Sophie for this? I turned to face them, my expression hard. Don't you dare use those children as shields. I've already set up small education funds for them, untouchable by you, that they can access when they turn 25. I'm protecting them from you. They won't inherit your bad habits, and they certainly won't inherit my money to pay off your debts. Brenda stood up, grabbing her purse so hard her knuckles turned white. Her mask of civility was gone, replaced by pure venom. You selfish old witch, you're going to die alone in this big rotting house, and when you do, we won't be there. Remember that. I'd rather be alone than with vultures, I said, calm as a cucumber. Now, get off my property before I decide to press charges for the attempted extortion I have recorded, right there. I pointed to the door. They didn't argue. They shuffled out like beaten dogs. I watched them get into their leased SUV. They had to execute a three-point turn to avoid hitting the Camaro, and I saw Caleb slam the steering wheel in frustration before peeling out onto the main road. I locked the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy cloak of keeping the peace was gone. I walked back to the table, picked up the recorder, and popped the memory card out. I'd keep that in the safe deposit box just in case. But I wasn't done. Kicking them out was step one, but they had insulted my competence, they had insulted my mind, and they had insulted Frank's memory by calling his car a piece of junk. I needed to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I was more than just a widow waiting to die. I grabbed the keys to the Camaro off the hook. The metal felt cool and heavy in my hand. I hadn't driven a stick shift in 20 years, but it's like riding a bike, right? I walked out to the driveway, opened the heavy door, and slid into the bucket seat. It smelled like fresh leather and gasoline. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, thrumming bass that vibrated through my chest. I put it in gear, eased off the clutch, and the tires chirped against the pavement. I wasn't just going to the grocery store. I had a destination in mind. Caleb mentioned he had a reputation to maintain at his country club. Well, I thought it was high time his mother paid a little visit to his world. I pulled onto the highway and punched the gas. The speedometer climbed. The rearview mirror showed my empty driveway, but the windshield showed nothing but open road. I was just getting started. The morning sun hit the living room floor, illuminating the shattered glass and the dried red wine stains on the carpet, a hangover from the chaos of the night before. Chloe hadn't slept. She sat at the kitchen island, clutching a mug of black coffee like it was a lifeline, her eyes puffy and vacant. Seeing my daughter like that, broken, humiliated, and stripped of her confidence, lit a fire in my belly that burned hotter than any anger I'd felt for myself. Derek hadn't just tried to rob me, he had emotionally gutted my child. "He tried to transfer the rest of the checking account at 3 a.m., Chloe said, her voice raspy. She was looking at her banking app. "The bank froze it because of the suspicious activity flag we placed last night. He's locked out." "He's desperate," I said, pouring myself a cup, "and desperate men do stupid things." We didn't wait around. By 9 a.m., we were in Elias's office. I handed over the USB drive with the footage. Elias watched the video of Derek threatening to put me in a home, his face grim. When the video finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This is gold, Martha," Elias said. "We have attempted extortion, elder abuse, and, with the financial records, wire fraud. I'm sending this to the district attorney immediately. We'll get an emergency protective order for both of you, but the police need to find him first." "He's not answering his phone," Chloe said, twisting her wedding ring, which she had finally taken off, between her fingers. "He's gone radio silence." "He won't leave without the money," I said. "He's got a ticket to Costa Rica, but he can't live on air. He needs cash." We spent the rest of the day locking down everything. We changed locks, updated passwords, and alerted the neighbors. But the real blow came late in the afternoon. My phone buzzed. It was Sam, my contractor up at the Pines. "Mrs. Higgins?" Sam's voice was tight, urgent. "You need to come up here, or maybe call the cops. Someone's been here." My stomach dropped. What happened? I showed up to do the evening rounds, and it's a mess. Someone took a sledgehammer to the new framing on the deck. They poured paint all over the lumber pile, and they spray painted, well, they wrote some nasty stuff on the siding. I felt the blood pound in my ears. "What did they write, Sam?" There was a pause. "It says, 'Your tomb.' Mrs. Higgins, I think it's him. I saw a car speeding down the service road when I pulled in, silver sedan." Derek. He wasn't running away yet. He was lashing out. He was attacking the one thing he knew meant the world to me. He wanted to hurt me before he fled. He wanted to destroy Henry's legacy because he couldn't cash it in. "I'm coming up there," I said. "Mom, no." Chloe grabbed my arm. "That's exactly what he wants. He's dangerous." "He's a coward," I corrected her. "He attacks wood and paint because he's too scared to face me, but he's not going to get away with trashing your father's house." I looked at Elias, who was still on speakerphone. "Elias, tell the police Derek is in the vicinity of Crater Lake. Tell them he's vandalized the property." "Martha, don't engage him," Elias warned. "Let the sheriff handle it." "I'm just going to assess the damage," I lied. I wasn't just going to assess the damage. I knew Derek. He was arrogant. If he saw me drive up there alone, he wouldn't be able to resist. He'd think I was vulnerable. He'd think I could scare him into transferring the money one last time. He didn't know that I had spent 40 years married to a man who hunted elk with a bow and arrow, and I knew a thing or two about setting a trap. I drove Chloe back to my house and made her promise to stay inside with the doors locked. She begs me not to go, but I told her this had to end tonight. I packed a bag, flashlight, heavy coat, boots, and a canister of bear mace I kept in the garage. The drive up to the mountains was eerie. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the highway. My phone pinged with a text from Sam. "Sheriff took a report, but they can't stay all night. I'm heading home. Be careful." I pulled into the driveway of the Pines an hour later. The headlights swept across the cabin. It was heartbreaking. Red spray paint marred the beautiful cedar siding. The new deck railing was smashed to splinters. It looked like a war zone. I parked the car and killed the engine. Silence rushed back in, heavy and thick. I got out, crunching on the gravel, and walked up the steps. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the darkness of the cabin. It smelled of sawdust and spray tint. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to spook him if he was watching from the woods. And I knew he was watching. I could feel it. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. I sat in the dark living room facing the large picture window that looked out over the lake. I set the bear mace on the table next to me. I took out my phone and turned the screen brightness to max, making myself a beacon in the dark room. Then I waited. It took 2 hours. The moon had arisen, casting a pale blue light over the yard. Then I saw it, a shadow detaching itself from the tree line. It moved hunched over, skittish. It crept toward the house. He was coming for me. He thought I was an old woman alone in the woods, terrified and weak. He was about to find out that he had walked into the den of a very angry lioness. And this time, there were no cameras, just me, him, and the consequences of his actions. The glass of the sliding door exploded inward with a deafening crash, showering the living room rug with shards. I didn't flinch. I sat perfectly still in my armchair, the canister of bear mace gripped tight in my right hand, hidden beneath the folds of my wool blanket. Derek stepped through the broken frame, his boots crunching on the glass. He looked like a nightmare. His clothes were stained with red spray paint, his hair was wild, and his eyes were bloodshot and manic. He was holding a tire iron, swinging it loosely by his side. "You really are stupid, aren't you, Martha?" he rasped, his voice echoing in the empty cabin. "I saw your car. I knew you'd come back to protect your precious woodpile." "It's not just wood, Derek," I said, my voice calm, cutting through the tension. "It's my home, something you know nothing about." He laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. "Home? This place is a dump, just like your daughter. You know, I was doing her a favor staying with her. She's boring, Martha, weak, just like you." "She's stronger than you'll ever be," I retorted. "She saw right through you." "She saw what you showed her," he screamed, stepping closer. The moonlight hit his face, illuminating the sweat beading on his forehead. "You poisoned her against me. You cut off my access. You ruined my life." "You ruined your own life when you decided to steal from your family," I said. "Now, put the iron down and get out." "I'm not going anywhere without that money," he snarled, raising the tire iron. He was only 10 feet away now. "You're going to open your banking app, and you're going to wire me $50,000 right now, or I swear to God, I will tear this place apart with you inside it." He took another step, then another. He was close enough that I could smell the stale alcohol and sweat on him. He thought he was the predator. He thought I was just a helpless old widow shaking in the dark. "Come and get it," I whispered. Derek lunged. In one fluid motion, I whipped the canister out from under the blanket. I didn't hesitate. I aimed right for his eyes and held down the trigger. A thick orange cloud of concentrated capsaicin blasted him square in the face. The sound he made wasn't human. It was a high-pitched shriek of pure agony. He dropped the tire iron, clawing at his eyes, stumbling backward. He crashed into the coffee table, flipping it over, and fell to the floor, writhing and screaming. "My eyes! Oh God, my eyes!" he wailed, rolling in the glass shards he had created. I stood up, walked over to where he lay curled in a fetal position, and kicked the tire iron out of his reach. I looked down at him with zero sympathy. "That's for my daughter," I said coldly. Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder by the second. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees, bouncing off the lake water. You called them?" Derek choked out, coughing and spitting. "I called them 10 minutes ago," I said, standing over him like a judge. "I told them there was an intruder on my property and I feared for my life. I just needed to keep you here long enough for them to arrive." The sheriff's deputies burst through the front door, guns drawn. They found a 72-year-old woman sitting calmly in her armchair and a grown man crying on the floor, blinded and defeated. They cuffed him and dragged him out. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, I stood on the porch, watching. Derek tried to look at me, but his eyes were swollen shut, tears streaming down his face. He looked pathetic, small. "It's over, Derek," I said, though he probably couldn't hear me over his own sobbing. The aftermath was swift and brutal for him. With the video evidence from the house, the bank records of the fraud, and the assault and vandalism charges from the cabin, Derek was buried under a mountain of legal trouble. He pleaded guilty to avoid a maximum sentence, but he still got 5 years in state prison. Chloe filed for divorce the day after his arrest. It was hard for her at first. She had to untangle the financial mess he left behind, but she's a fighter. She moved in with me for a few months and we healed together. We cried, we drank wine, and we rebuilt. 6 months later, The Pines was finally finished. I stood on the brand new cedar deck looking out at the deep blue water of Crater Lake. The air was fresh, and the smell of fear was gone, replaced by the scent of blooming wildflowers. The cabin was beautiful, restored to exactly how Henry had built it, but with a few modern upgrades. The glass door slid open behind me. Chloe walked out, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. She looked different now, lighter. The shadows were gone from her eyes. "Ethan and Sophie are down by the dock fishing," she said. "Sophie says she caught a monster, but I think it was just a log." I laughed, taking the glass. "That's what your father used to say. It's a log fish, best kind for the grill." Chloe leaned against the railing, looking at the view. "You know, Mom, you were right about everything. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. We protect our own. That's what family does. And sometimes that means taking out the trash." We clinked our glasses. The nightmare was over. Derek was rotting in a cell, erasing his legacy one day at a time. And me, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, in my home, with my family, enjoying every single cent of my hard-earned money. Henry would have been proud. I took a sip of lemonade and watched the sun dip behind the mountains. It was a good life, and nobody was ever going to take it from me again.